Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Biology Bios. My name is Jim Edelman. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Memphis. And my purpose with this podcast is really twofold. First, I want to let folks know that most Thursdays during the semester, we have talks by visiting researchers at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall. And that's folks from all over the country and world talking about the really cool biological research that they do. The second purpose is to have those folks here learn a little bit more about them, how they got where they are, and what really excites them about the research they do. In addition, I'd like to say a quick disclaimer that I borrowed these questions from Rhett Miller's excellent podcast called Wheels Off, so please check that out as well. But without further ado, let's get to this week's guest. Thanks so much for being here. Dr. Colleen Jonsson, welcome to Biology Bios.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'd like to start out with asking for just a really brief intro of who you are, where you are, and the sort of broadest brushstrokes of what your interests are.
Sure. We're right now. I'm at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in our lovely city of Memphis. And I'm in the Department of Microbiology, Immunology, and Biochemistry. And my interests are in viral host interactions, both environmentally and more within the context of a laboratory. So,
excellent. So within that sort of umbrella that you outlined, can you describe a project that you're currently working on that you're particularly excited about?
Right. Well, I suppose it's hard not to be excited about all of them. But we have actually 3 different projects in the lab looking at host virus interactions, one with hantaviruses, which are focused on the field ecology of the rodent and the virus in a field setting. And then secondly, we're using, I think what you'd call them advanced systems to look at virus-host interactions with SARS-CoV-2. And then finally, we're looking at virus-host interactions with an equine encephalitis virus called Venezuelan equine, and then also Eastern equine, which is in the United States. Actually, there's been a few cases in the last month. They had to shut down some parks in Massachusetts, I think, and New Hampshire. And most recently, there was a case in New York. And this virus causes neurological infections in some patients. And so our hope is that we can build both an in vitro model to complement what we have to do with the mouse model. So I actually have 3, and I love all 3 of them. And together they teach us different things about virus-host interactions. But
yeah, and you have different modes of transmission in those different systems, which is, I think, really interesting to span vector-borne to direct contact. Yeah.
Right. But in each case, we're looking at the respiratory aspect. And with hantaviruses, they transmit through the air, through excreta. For example, there was a case, I think, recently in Louisiana, and a person was cleaning out a trailer that they had as a vacation home. And they went in there and there were rat droppings and they were cleaning up. And from the rat droppings, the person was exposed. Whereas with SARS-CoV-2, we know that that's person to person. And then with Venezuelan equine encephalitis, it normally transmits through mosquitoes. However, there are documented cases from laboratory accidents, as well as there's an extra edge on here of bioterrorism. And so it was one of the few viruses developed by Russia and the United States as a bioweapon during the Cold War.
Really? I did not know that history.
Yeah,
wow.
It's not a good history.
No, it's not, but
it's not a good history at all.
Yeah,
wow. It's not something you want scientists to research.
No. And so, but Eastern equine encephalitis, that's vector-borne. Is that vector-borne entirely?
Yeah, but lab accidents can happen. So it's assumed that, although I don't recall reading any lab accidents of Eastern. Most of them occurred during the 1930s and 40s when the virus was first discovered. It was discovered during an outbreak in Trinidad in horses and donkeys. And so all these horses and donkeys started getting neurological disease and dying. And so I think it was a combination of U.S. and the Trinidad government identified this virus in the brain of the horses that were deceased and named it Trinidad donkey. Because in the old days we could do that. Now they want to have all these fancy names.
I suppose Eastern Equine Encephalitis sounds a little bit more sciencey, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess, but at least it describes that it's on the east somewhere.
True.
But
so with these projects and the sort of like dangerous viruses that we're talking about, I wondered if you could talk about your other role there, running the biocontainment lab there.
Right, that's right. So I'm also the director of the Regional Biocontainment Lab, and I've had similar positions at the University of Louisville and at Southern Research Institute in Birmingham. And so basically what I've done at each of these institutions is created an environment for student training and safety. And so we train, and I have trained numerous students, undergrads and grads, and of course, professionals in how to conduct work at biosafety level 3 in these types of laboratories, containment laboratories. Some people call them high containment. I often think of high containment as biosafety level 4 with Ebola, but they are, traditionally also referred to as high containment. And so in these laboratories, we have procedures and processes to help everyone stay safe. And for the most part, because of the processes we've had, I can say, knock on wood, that I've never had any serious incident under my watch because everybody's trained very well. It's sort of the sort of program where you have to be trained to 100% proficiency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So people have to pay attention.
That says a lot. Like you guys, you were doing a ton of work with the SARS-CoV-2 outbreak, but even without that, you just have so many people going through that space, working on these things that could be really dangerous.
Oh, yeah. No, so a lot of training goes into it. I would say that a person really isn't truly competent to work independently for anywhere from 6 months to more to longer.
Wow.
It really depends on the individual's disposition, if you will. Some people are, it takes a while for them to acclimate to being calm, I would say.
Right.
I need very calm people.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So, yeah.
So switching gears a little bit, I kind of want to ask a little bit about your sort of path in science. So was there a time that you knew that you wanted to be a scientist, or was it a gradual process? How did you end up where you are doing what you do?
Yeah. Yeah, so there was a very distinct person in my training and my education that his name is John Hawker, and Dr. Hawker, and he was a biology professor, and I took biology 101 or whatever it was with him.
Okay.
And I thought that I just engaged completely with biology and the biology of the cell, and he opened up this vast world to us. And so I continued to take courses from him, field biology, field mountain ecology. We did a 3-week collect the plant trip in the Absaroka Mountain Range, and was in Wyoming and things like that. And I loved being outside, and I loved studying nature. And so I really thought, this is for me. I'm going to be a ecologist, right? And then I actually started at a junior college. So this guy was at a junior college. I didn't have any idea. I was raised in the city of St. Louis, and I had no educational aspirations whatsoever. And so I said, well, okay, I got to keep going. And so I went to the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and there I discovered biochemistry.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, well, this is even more fascinating for me right now because it's sort of the mechanics of how the cell actually works, how proteins work, how RNA works. And so I went down deep into
Yeah.
that and went and did my biochemistry PhD at Purdue. And actually, I was still more ecologically focused, and I was focused on plant fungal pathogen interactions. And so I
Okay.
studied plant fungal interactions and enjoyed that. But I really felt like from that, I was like, I got to learn more. It still isn't mechanistic enough for me. And so I went and went to study with Monica Roth at University of Medical Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. It's a very long name. Anyway, I went to study with her and work on just one protein and how that protein worked from a retrovirus.
Okay.
And that sparked all the virology I've ever done. So that was the little seed that became and then it expanded back out. So you can see my education started very broad, and then I narrowed to how does an enzyme function, and then I came back out to how do all these things function together in a living organism. So,
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I've full disclosure, I've known Colleen for a while here, but I haven't known about that history, and like knowing what you do now, it actually makes total sense, right?
yeah, yeah,
That I mean, and I think it's a really cool lesson that you can have these diverse influences and these different chapters, right? Where you're like, you know what, I'm
hmm
drilling down on this enzyme, but like having had those experiences that you just described out in the field and having this broader ecological context. I mean, it makes total sense to me that you do this hardcore virology sequencing on viruses that come from rodents in the rainforest, you know?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
just like, okay,
No, it
that
was
checks out.
that was like a dream come true, right? To bring it all together, to
Yeah.
try to understand how a large ecosystem might work. And clearly, it's more than any one lab can address. It's really multidisciplinary, and I have had a lot of collaborators over the years, from people who look at the perspective from the GIS, right? Perspective to my mammologist colleague, Robert Owen, to, you know, I mean, just number of different people who have come in and shared their time with me, and I've really grown from that, right? So it's
Yeah. So much of what we do, I mean, it has to be collaborative, right? You can
yeah,
be, it takes a long time to be an expert in something. And
right.
so it's kind of hard to be an
And we
expert in
never
everything.
are.
Yeah.
We
Yeah. You're
never
always
are.
learning.
Right. We
Yeah.
never become an expert because the field is always changing, right? Fields are always changing. We're learning more. We have different perceptions and conceptions. I mean, but yeah, so it's been a wonderful experience. And I was actually just telling one of my graduate students the other day, I said, don't ever feel like that because you have a PhD in microbiology, immunology, biochemistry, whatever, you're a virologist. I mean, people come out of my lab and people say, oh, you're a virologist, right? And that's just the beginning of your palette. That's just one little streak, right? I mean, the direction you decide to go, the people you decide to interact with can move you in many, many different areas. And it's a foot in the door, if anything. That's all it is. It's an experience and education to build upon. That's it, right? You might study how to engineer viral vectors to treat cancer or muscular dystrophy or whatnot, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things in different directions people go in. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
right.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit here. We deal with a lot of rejection in science, right? There's even from undergrad, right? You have to take these tests. You don't always do as well as you want. Like then we have papers that reviewers say they don't like, et cetera. But we also have, and maybe because of that, we have inner critics. that are, that little voice in your head that's telling you, I don't know about that idea or that sort of thing. And I wondered, especially, for the students that are listening, how do you deal with that voice when it comes up? How do you silence it or maybe make it work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we all find there are people in our lives that antagonize us too, right?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with just everything around us, right? And I mean, I always had a plan B.
Okay.
I always have a plan B. And so when I was a lot younger, um, going to University of Missouri St. Louis, I was sort of sad about that. Once I realized that that wasn't the premier institution in the United States, right? So
I mean, I grew up in St. Louis too, so like UMSL is a great school.
yeah, no, it was a good education, but I was like, well, is that good enough, right? That started
Right.
early,
I
and
see what you're saying.
I was an older student. I took off 2 years to basically get myself together, and came back and finished. But I think I've always this is might sound very very strange, but I've always exercised. And so, as an undergraduate and a graduate student and postdoc and so on and sabbatical, I mean, I've always made an hour a day for exercise.
Mm,
And during that, whatever I'm doing, it's a time to just step away from the noise. And then sometimes what I see is that when I'm doing it, I see a solution. I see a plan B. I see that it's okay. I see that who cares?
hmm
In the bigger scheme of things, it's a setback and I can still make it continue on forward, right? But I think it never goes away, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so more recently, my exercise has turned more towards yoga
Okay.
and using meditation to sit and reflect and determine where the voices are coming from and why, and what are they trying to tell me, and then I need to tell them something like,
Yeah.
"Hey, that's old news. Go away."
Right.
I
Right.
think we spend I don't know. I think through other activities, um, our family, our friends, our social lives, we can gain greater perspective on our work and its significance in our lives, right? Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I believe we need to be good people. We need to take care of ourselves, um, and to do that, sometimes you have to make hard choices. You have to make hard choices to take care of yourself. So if there's somebody in your environment that's, I can tell you when I was a young female professor at a particular institution, actually, this has happened twice. I've had issues with, particular colleagues, and my decision was I'm going to find a different institution. Now, I could try to fix the institution, but it's probably not going to happen. And so you have to make hard choices. You have to say, hey, I'm just going to, I've had a great experience here and I'm going to move on to my next step because this environment isn't helping me grow.
Yeah.
So you really want to find family, friends, people who are supportive of you and your 360 at all times. Even, you don't need 100 friends. I think,
No.
just having one good friend that you can talk to and say, "Hey, how do I deal with this?" or "What do you think?" And
Yeah.
then there's also what would you be a friend to yourself? When you have that, I'm not good enough, or I can't make it, or I'll never make it through grad school, or I could never find a job. Say, what would your good friend tell you right now?
Right. Right.
right? What would your good friend tell you right
And
now?
what would you tell one of your friends? Like my inner critic
Yeah.
is way meaner to me than I would ever be to one of my friends. Like
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
a total jerk, my inner critic. Like
Oh, yeah.
like come on.
Right.
And
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 it's good
so
to
like
make jokes about it too, right?
yeah, it
Like,
does, it
like
does
it's
help.
really good to make jokes about it because
All yeah.
the third reviewer, you know?
I I think that all of what you're talking about kind of there's I see a theme there that like there's all these different ways to kind of give yourself like a pause button. And
Yeah.
that gives you that just pause button that gives you some perspective that it was there. You just needed to take that breath. You needed to exercise for an hour and there it was.
Or
Like that's
whatever. It could be cooking or
yeah.
anything that you really enjoy that gives you some sense of gratification. And so quite honestly, I'll tell you the best one that I had was when I was going for to be an assistant professor. And of course, every, few months I was reminded of I had to, make it through tenure to keep my job. And I was like most everybody else, very stressed about it. And I said, well, you know, if that happens, then I finally get to go and be a park ranger.
Ah,
So
there's a
I,
plan B. There you go.
that was my plan B. I was like, I could finally be a park ranger, which I would enjoy.
Yeah.
I might not enjoy it as much as I think I enjoy it, but way back then, I thought I was still enamored with this idea that I would just be up in the fire tower looking out for fires and seeing what's going on in the park.
Doesn't sound
So,
bad to me.
yeah.
Um, so actually we hit on a couple of things that I was going to ask about specifically, but I think maybe I'll follow up still. So you mentioned exercising as something that's really important to you to kind of, just keep perspective on things. What else do you like to do when you're not in the lab, when you're not doing science?
Mm. Well, I like to read. I've always been a bit of a geek about that, I guess. So I like science fiction, and
Nice.
so I read quite a bit of science fiction. I like the alternate reality perspective,
Yeah.
right? And so my favorite one right now is The Three Body Problem,
Oh, I
which is a
haven't heard that.
Chinese science fiction book originally, and they adapted it to an American. And then there's also The Three Body Problem in Chinese that you can watch on uh, cable.
Okay.
But yeah, I really like the alternate scientific reality, which some of it's come true, right? So if you watch Star Trek when you were little, you
Yeah.
know, they have the little flip thing, the little
Yeah.
flip to talk to each other, and then
Yeah.
hey, it happened. Um,
Yeah.
so I like thinking about the possibilities of
I
of
I like Margaret Atwood's stuff for that reason. I mean, it's very dystopian, but like she takes things that people are working on and then she nudges them a little bit further. Like we're not there, but you see like we could actually get there.
yeah, yeah, that is the more dark,
Yeah, it's
more dark,
definitely scary, but it's
dark.
she's so good at doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
so then this one we kind of started talking about this as well, but if you think back to an undergrad version of yourself, working in today's world of biology and research, what advice would you have for that person?
Well, in during my undergraduate experience, I really wanted experience in the laboratory, and I believe that's easier to access now. There's more programs to get into the lab and uh, do conduct research as undergraduates. So um, I would, if I was around today, I would be applying to all those great undergraduate programs they have during the summer. The program that I found that led me to plant science was
Hmm.
I got a job in the summers at Monsanto
Okay. Yeah.
in St. Louis, and so Yeah, so I was basically taking care of plants inside of greenhouses and out at their field farm for soybeans. I
Yeah.
know quite a bit about soybeans, more than the average woman, I think.
Hey, I mean,
you know, but
if you got a summer
that's
internship at Monsanto, you're gonna know that sort of thing.
yeah. So and that was also so interning certainly at a company is also a really good experience. I knew from my internship that it wasn't going to be for me. It was a little bit more rigid than I liked. I wanted to explore more. And that's actually what motivated me to go to, graduate school. I was like, well, I got to find out what's ticking here. So, I mean, I've always been really curious. And so, I mean, even with my yoga, I'm curious. I mean, I can't stop asking questions about yoga. And, it turns out that this is a little bit kind of strange, but yoga actually affects your physiology. And there's actual research going on now about yoga, which I had no idea about until like in the last year. I had no idea, no
Yeah.
idea. And so, why I've turned to meditation is because there are certain types of meditation that I think undergraduates would benefit from to slow down their mind. Because when you're really young, your mind is moving at 100 miles an hour and you're thinking about this and that and the other thing. And that pause, just turning it all off for 5 or 10 minutes, gives you clarity so that you can say, okay, what is my next step?
Yeah.
What do I want to do versus this bath of noise that we exist in right now and with social media. Um, I am very happy I had no social media as an undergrad. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's a real distraction and it interferes with brain power, actually. I think it's a deterrent from being able to realize who you are and realize what you want to actually do. If you're on it all the time, I think there's
Yeah.
just too many people telling you what to do. So,
And again, I think this comes back and really fits with the theme that you're talking about with yoga and meditation is these different ways to just have a pause button. Because
yeah,
our it, it's I don't know if you've had this experience too, but like when I've had projects going on, there's like a if you work harder, more gets accomplished up to a point, and then you've got
right,
diminishing returns. Like if you're in the lab like for 16 hours on the weekend, I I personally am not as effective, right? Like
right.
so I think doing that all the time and just keeping that drive go 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 without that moment of reflection, that yeah, that leads you I mean, that leads you to worse results a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes you need
Yeah,
to do long hours. I'm not saying that you don't, but these
yeah,
pauses that you're talking about are really important.
yeah. There's certain, it's like I don't know, you have to be able to feel it. How, you're working on a problem and you're trying to figure it out and you stay with it, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. And then you have to pause. And I think we're always afraid, oh, I'm going to lose my train of thought, but you actually never lose your train of thought. Um, so yeah, it's always there. So it might take you a minute to get back into focus, but learning to go in and out of focus is actually good, right? Learning
Yeah.
since then, and learn to relax really quickly and then learn to speed up,
Yeah.
right? So you kind of need to, I mean, especially as we get older and we have more responsibilities both at home and um, at work. uh, there's situations that can happen sometimes daily, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
and and the way we respond to them uh, has has a lot to say about our disposition. So we have to work through all that. We have to not make every moment so like it's stressful. right? It's just another thing. It's just another thing to deal with. But when you're younger, you don't see that, right? You're like, oh my God, I got a B+ on my exam.
I
And
mean,
so,
I still have to silence that voice and that tendency to everything that pops up unexpectedly is immediately a crisis. And that's not necessarily true, right? It's
right,
unexpected, but that doesn't make it a
right,
crisis.
right. And it's the unexpected situations we deal with all day long, right? If
Yeah.
we're actually out there and taking risks.
I mean,
And I
it's
think that's another thing is that you have to take risks. You have to talk to people and not be afraid to talk to people. And believe it or not, I'm fairly shy. And so um,
I
it,
do
ta it
find that
takes
hard to believe, actually.
it takes me a minute,
Yeah.
right? It takes me a minute to, you know, I want to talk to this person and find out. So I went to Purdue for my PhD, and um, I revered Michael Rossman, who was a crystallographer, and he, completed the structure of many, many plant viruses and animal viruses. And I just thought he was just the smartest man on planet Earth. And I didn't even try to apply to rotate through his lab. I was like,
Oh, wow.
that voice was pretty heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't get there. But later on in my career, I went to a meeting and he was there, and I was like, "Gosh, I would really like to solve the structure. I'd really like to have the structure solved of Hantan virus or hantavirus." And it was one of the smaller meetings, and so I kind of rehearsed in my mind that what I would go and sit by him at breakfast and
Okay.
just broach the subject and see what happened, right? And I was just like, oh, my little tray,
Right. Right.
can I sit next to you, mister? And I started talking to him, and he's like, this is fabulous,
Oh,
and I'm
that's
like, it's
awesome.
fabulous. And then within 3 years, he solved the structure.
Oh, that's so
You know?
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we just have to take those risks. And yeah, someone can say no. Someone can say, I don't have time for you or that. And then you just go to the next person.
Yeah.
You just go to the next person,
And
right?
my
You just,
experience is like even when that happens, if you come up to somebody and you say, I really like your work and I've got this thing that I'd like to pick your brain about, most people are going to be flattered and say, tell me about the thing. Like
yeah.
I don't know what percentage, but it's a high percentage of the time in my experience.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think we like talking about what we do, and we love what we do. It's easy, right? Um,
Yeah.
I could sit and talk about it for hours probably.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
That's fantastic. Well, man, so much good advice like peppered through today. Before I close out, I like to close with a question for you, which is, what have I not asked you about that you wish I have, or that
Huh.
you wish I had?
Uh, hmm. How about what's the project I've enjoyed the most?
Oh, that's great. Tell me,
How about
yeah, tell
that?
me about that.
So my favorite project over time has been the work I've done in Paraguay, which is what I'm going to talk about when I come to visit you.
Oh, fantastic.
Learning about Paraguay, learning about the food, the culture was a big part of my draw to going back.
And
Right?
that
I
that
mean,
project is like a couple decades.
mhm,
Like
yeah,
you have a nice long-term data set.
yeah. So, and we've actually just sent more samples up to Rockefeller for the Oligorhizomes nigripes to have that genome sequenced. Then there's outside of Acodon montensis, there are no, to our knowledge, we have not seen any complete genomes sequenced, and so we're annotating one of the rodents right now, Acodon montensis, which is a generalist. And well, Oligorhizomes is a generalist too. It's a cute little thing. Cute
Ha,
little. They're all very cute,
yeah.
very cute little rodents.
Yeah.
So
Very cute little rodents with hantaviruses.
with hantavirus, and then a lot of
Yeah,
other things. I mean, they
sure.
suffer. They suffer in the forest. They have a lot of challenges every day. snakes, owls,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
disease.
a red and tooth and
Rough.
claw, right?
It's not a good life for them, but I'm sure it is for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this holds true. The hunters like to say all good days except the last. It's probably not. It's probably not that extreme. You probably get sick a lot before the last day, but
Yeah,
there's probably some good days in there.
poor little guys. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Colleen Jonsson, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me. We're really looking forward to your talk, so it'll be great to have you on campus in just about a week, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks again.
Looking forward, Jim.
Thank you so much again to our guest, Dr. Colleen Jonsson. You can check out her talk Thursday, October 3rd, 2024 at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall. Hope to see you there.